welcome to the Wildcard Rewind podcast. We have a full crew today with a wonderful guest as well. Free agency is in the book, so it's firmly into draft season. Let's rewind.
I just wanna rewind to when we were young and hard. Back to all those good times. Take me back to the start.
So free agency was fantastic fun, but now we are firmly into the draft part of the off season, which is, I think personally, probably my favourite part. Getting stuck into prospects and seeing where everyone actually ends up when you've spent months looking through all of the potential outcomes and implications for different teams. You have trades going on. We've already had the trade from the Vikings, getting themselves a second first-round pick. And so today we're going to be looking through the rookie quarterbacks, giving a bit of an overview of our thoughts around them. We have a full house today in terms of hosts. So I'm joined by the wonderful Paul Pickin. Paul, how are you?
I'm doing amazing. It's Monday. We're back chatting. And you two have decided to show up this week and not leave me and Kev to hold up the fort on our own. You two owe an apology to Kev because every time he comes on, you two seem to disappear and it's just me and him talking. So he's started to get the hint a little bit. So I think you should both publicly apologize to him, you know?
Sorry, Kev. We are also joined by the incredible Hannah Rowland. Hannah, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks, Lewis. I'm back, thankfully. Got to keep Paul in check. I mean, it wasn't really very good of us, was it, Lewis, last week to leave Paul on his own. Anything can happen in those situations, so we need to keep an eye on him, really. So thankfully we're back, ready to keep an eye on him and also chat QBs with our awesome guests too.
Yeah, so we, not just Hannah and I are keeping an eye on Paul today, we've also roped in an extra pair of hands, the wonderful Jack from the Wildcard Devi podcast, available on X at JackCDCTT. Jack, how are you doing? Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, I'm really well, thanks, Lewis, and no problem whatsoever. It's really fun to be invited on and be on this pod with you guys.
Yeah. Do you agree? I mean, obviously coming from a Derry perspective, do you find that the draft cycle is your favorite part of the process, or do you find that you kind of are a little bit more advanced from people having watched these players in college for a few years beforehand?
Yeah, I think both of those things are true. I love the draft season because people start to pick up on things that we've looked at for a few months, at least years in the cases of some like top prospects, and it's a lot of fun to see people catching on. And the earlier you can do a rookie draft, the bigger the advantage you can have if you really dive into the Devi world. But I also really enjoy getting to test my skills in rookie drafts for dynasties.
Yeah, I'm in my first startup currently that includes rookies, which is always fun when you get it done before the NFL draft. And obviously the strength of this class is really at wide receiver and quarterback, and it's weaker aside from the top tight end. It's weaker at running back and tight end. So obviously I've loaded up on my rookie running backs and tight ends, and I've not taken a single rookie quarterback or wide receiver because I'm a very smart analyst who knows what they're doing. Let's crack on into the big news of the week before we get on to the quarterbacks. So the first thing that I just wanted to note, and I don't want to talk about it too much because you guys will make fun of me, but the greatest defensive player of all time, Aaron Donald, retired over the course of last week. I wrote an article on my website, Dynasty Pancake, about what Aaron Doyle meant to me. He was the reason that I started supporting the Rams. Watching him was unlike watching any other player, and that was the case even before I knew how to play the game, and I knew kind of what was happening. You could even see when you had very little understanding of American football that this guy was different. And I don't know how it's going to feel coming around to week one and not just looking to see where 99's lining up. So very sad about that, but like I was going to say like, oh, good for him. But I don't think he listens. But I'm very excited for him to be able to rest a little bit in retirement. I think he's earned it. But I'm not going to ask you guys for your opinion
Did-
because, like, I can see
just wanna-
Paul's face.
I just want to say so. Did anyone else feel like we were in a Shakespeare novel then? And he was like really, really in like Lewis. I feel like you were really in love there. You know, like I wonder who's going to play you in the movie. You know what I mean? Like,
I think it's less. I think it's less kind of Shakespearean and more like the video to Stan by Eminem, with me like outside Aaron Donald's window, being like, "Aaron, I wrote you, but you didn't write back."
totally.
But the other huge thing from this last week is we finally got a trade for Justin Fields, which was to a landing spot that people have been hopeful for. We just were hoping that he would have been the only quarterback that they picked up. So Justin Fields went to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a conditional 2025 sixth round pick, which to note currently is less than Kenny Pickett, Sam Howell, and probably Desmond Ridder as well are traded for. Which no one was really expecting. The difficulty obviously being the fifth year option for Justin Fields and money you have to pay him now. That will go up to a fourth rounder if he plays over 51% of snaps in the 2024 season. I'll come to you first, Jack, for your thoughts. Just generally, do you think this was a smart move for the Steelers? Do you think the Bears potentially could have gotten more? What are your general thoughts on the move?
Yeah, my initial reaction was darn it, because I don't like the Steelers and I think this is a really good move for them at the cost that they've paid. I think it's basically nothing. I was expecting Fields to go for a third rounder somewhere, and I have to confess I am an Ohio State fan, so I had some of the best years of watching college football following Justin Fields light up the Big Ten. So I really want him to succeed, and I think he has promise beyond what he has been able to show at the Bears. So I think for the Steelers, for the price, for the competition between two quarterbacks that are really cheap financially as well as the draft cost, I think it's a no-brainer for the Steelers. And it sounds like Justin Fields wanted to go there too. He had a few other teams interested, but he told his agent to basically turn them down.
Yeah, I think I struggle with there are lots of other teams interested, because I think if they had been, they might have potentially got a little bit more. But I definitely think there's untapped upside there. And in terms of the cost, Russ and Fields are going to be combined for 4.5 million on the Steelers cap this year. Paul, we'll come to you in terms of the Bears side of this. So we obviously, Jack said thinks probably a good move for the Steelers. What about from the Bears' perspective? Do you think they had to trade Justin Fields? Do you think they potentially could have gotten more? We're obviously asking you. We spent a lot of the podcast in season asking you if you thought they should trade Kyler Murray or draft Caleb Williams. So obviously this is something you've a little experience talking about.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I don't know. I think they could have got more for Fields, but I don't know if they wanted too much or what. But when you saw the free agency market and all of these QBs going everywhere, all you just saw was Justin Fields' value just drop and drop and drop and drop. All these spaces got filled with different QBs and different players, and there was loads of them that moved about. And then everyone wanted him to go to Atlanta. Then you saw Kirk Cousins go to Atlanta and everything like this. And then you were like, well, he's running out of spots. And honestly, I think they've just taken what they can at the moment. I think they've obviously, like Jack said, Justin Fields wanted to go to Steelers. I think they've taken what they wanted. They've taken what they've got, and then they've turned it into, well, if he's going to start for you, it's going to be a better pick and stuff like that. So they've tried to angle it as best they can for them. I think it's a smart move because, let's be honest, they're going Caleb Williams. He's, Justin Fields is just going to sit on the bench. If he sits on the bench, his value is just going to decrease more. So they've taken what they can now. And I think it's a smart move by the Bears, if I'm honest. R.I.P. Caleb Williams,
What a I mean, we'll come on to talk about him later, but what a supporting cast that he's potentially going to have, assuming he goes there in DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift, Khalil Herbert, and Roshan Johnson, a better O-line. It's resources they never put in to Fields, which is kind of upsetting. I'll come to you, Hannah, as well in terms of the fantasy impact. Looking particularly at kind of dynasty leagues, like obviously Fields probably isn't really in play for redraft next season, unless you disagree and you think he'll win out the job. But for dynasty, what are your thoughts on kind of the implications for Fields? Is he someone you're looking to buy and hope that he wins out the job? Is he someone that you're kind of looking to get what you can for in the hope that people think that that this is a good move for him? What are your thoughts generally on Fields?
So generally, I don't have a lot of interest in him at this stage. So if I haven't got him, I'm not actively going out to buy him. Although if you like him, this is the time, isn't it? Really. Unless someone is like a true Justin Fields truther, you know, ultimately he's gone to the Steelers. They've announced that Russ is going to be the starter and he's going to be the backup. You know, he was sold for very little, which kind of makes you think, or, you know, what the NFL thinks of him is not particularly high. You know, there were plenty of teams that needed a backup and a potential future starter. You know, the Seahawks being a prime example. You know, he could have sat behind Geno for a year and then potentially taken, you know, the job later. You know, there are so many different places that could have traded for him that didn't. They opted to go elsewhere. So it makes me think that the NFL don't actually think that highly of him, rightly or wrongly. And I just think that ultimately, I'm not convinced he's going to become a franchise QB and a reliable starter for you. Now, if he's like your QB 3 or 4, fine, you could probably, you know, trade for him and see what he does for you. But if you need a QB, I don't think I'd be after him. If I have him on my team, I would hold him. You know, ultimately, he may get a chance to start this season. And if he does, then his stock is going to rise and then I'll sell him. But I don't think selling him at this point is worth it, personally, unless there is someone who's like, oh, I love Justin Fields and he's going to do great at, you know, at the Steelers and he's going to win the job. Fine. If you want to buy him off me, buy him off me. But I personally think you're going to get more value if he starts at some point this season than if you sell him now.
And I think Fields is a really interesting kind of example of the difference between value in fantasy and value in the actual NFL. Because if Fields starts at all in fantasy, he'll be a completely viable starter. But he will struggle to get starts, and we've seen what the league thinks of him. I'm interested, and I'll open it to the floor, in terms of kind of knowing Fields' range of outcomes, right? He's someone that could never see a starting snap again. Probably unlikely, but like he could never see a starting snap again. But if he plays, he will probably end up finishing as a top 5 QB, despite how he performs on an actual NFL field. There's a tier of quarterbacks at the moment, which is kind of the older veterans. So Matthew Stafford, Derek Carr, Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers. I'm interested to know, I'll open it up to whoever wants to take this one. Would you take Fields over that tier of players, or would you take kind of the security of the starting job over Fields?
Wow, don't all rush in at once, guys. Okay. So I'll take this one. So ultimately, like Hannah said, if he's like my QB3, QB4, I probably would take the risk with him. But it would depend on my first couple of QBs. If I've got safe QBs as sort of my first 2, maybe 3, then I'd take a high risk player as my 4th. That's when I'd look at Justin Fields, because let's be honest, if Russell Wilson does any sort of injury and Justin Fields walks into that job and he's starting week in, week out, as you've just mentioned, he's somebody that could finish as a top 5 QB, and he's literally, his value is going to go through the roof. We know what he can do when he's let loose rushing wise. But if I was to take some high risk players, say, I'm trying to think of like players as an example now. So if I take sort of like a Pat Mahomes and then like a Jared Goff and then maybe like an Aaron Rodgers, then I'd take a risk with Justin Fields. But if I've taken like an Anthony Richardson and people like that, then I'd look at like safer sort of, that's when I'd be looking like my Derek Carrs and players like that I know are going to be a safe value. I don't need somebody that potentially, if he gets that starting job, I think he gets the starting job, just putting it out there. I think he wins it. I think he starts week 1. I think Justin Fields is better than Russell Wilson. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he starts.
Well, that was the next thing that I wanted to go around is to ask all of you who you think is going to be the week 1 starter and also the week 17 starter. So I assumed from that, Paul, that you then think that Fields will keep the job for the whole season.
Yes. I think he's better than Russell Wilson. I think he just needs the right sort of direction, a little bit of work with him. He can. We've all seen it. You need that mobile QB. You need somebody that can rush when it comes to it. You need somebody that can get the ball about. Russell Wilson is. We've been asking people to let Russell Wilson cook for 3 years now, and I'm honestly going to tell you, he can't cook. Okay, he's not a very good chef. He's not doing it, guys. Okay, and people are like, oh, he's got to Pittsburgh. He's going to be the starting QB. Oh, every arrows up for everyone and stuff like this. Justin Fields starts week 1. Just say.
What about you, Jack? What do you think?
It's a really difficult one to call. I think you could put too much stock in Russ getting promised he's the starter because he's the one they have to keep happy. Justin Fields is on his rookie contract and didn't have any other option, whereas Russ has chosen to go to the Steelers with a bit more on the table. But I think Russell Wilson will start the season as the starter, but he'll have a very short leash because the Steelers can't afford for the season to tank with an aging veteran quarterback who's only on a 1-year contract. I think Fields' situation, they've traded for him. They need to see what he's worth. If Russ is not cooking or letting Subway do all of his cooking for him, then Justin Fields needs to be given a shot. So I think Justin Fields ends the season as the starter because I don't think Russell Wilson has enough to win that job and win a longer term contract.
Yeah. How about you, Hannah?
You know, I don't think he will win it straight away. And I think ultimately, I don't think Fields was originally in their plans because they signed Russ before free agency even started. If you remember, he went on a visit and they signed him. I think they planned to keep Kenny Pickett and have a, competition. Ultimately, Kenny Pickett was a brat, so they got rid of him. So then they were like, oh, well, no one's interested in Fields. We'll take a shot on Fields. So, yes, I think ultimately if Russ doesn't do well, they'll give him an opportunity. But I don't think that their plan was to have Fields 1 on the team or 2 even starting for them in 2024. And personally, he's a great runner and he certainly has had upside and good games, but his passing still leaves a lot to be desired. Like he really isn't, a fantastic QB. Neither is Russ. I totally get that. But I do wonder whether they want more of a game manager, rather than kind of a Fields boom bust type play. And I think they are a little bit on the hot seat, ultimately. So I think they probably are going to go with the safe bet to start with. Obviously, if Russ flames out, of course, they'll give him a shot. But I don't believe he'll go in with that job in week 1, personally.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of between you two, Hannah and Paul, that I agree that I think Fields is the better quarterback. That's my job. I agree that I think Fields is the quarterback that I would want to start, especially because from the Steelers' perspective, what difference does it make if they get knocked out in the wildcard round again? Like they do it every season, that they go, just over 500, make playoffs, and then get knocked out. But I think from their perspective that they went out and got Russ, and I agree they ended up with Fields. So I think Russ starts the whole season, and I think it's the wrong move. I would rather see what you have with Justin Fields and try and see if there's anything there that you can develop. But I think from the Steelers' perspective, I think they will want to remain competitive and not kind of go with a little bit more uncertainty. Not to say that I think Russ is a surefire kind of average quarterback at this point, but I think they'll end up starting Russell Wilson for the whole season. I can see you shaking your head, Paul.
No comment. No comment.
I was gonna ask some questions about free agent wide receivers, but I'm very aware of time, so I might take us straight into the rookie quarterbacks. Um, s- yeah, you want desperate to talk about Tyler Boyd?
Yeah, always.
Um,
I just think my prediction's right. I think Mike Williams goes to the Panthers.
I
I'm just proud of that one. But we could go straight to the QBs.
let's go straight into the QBs, and Mike Williams will go to the Panthers. Um, I like him to the Jets, but anyway. So we're going to go through the top 6 rookie quarterbacks, or the consensus top 6 rookie quarterbacks, and probably the ones that will be taking top 6 off the board. I'm going to go prospect by prospect. So we're going to talk through the strengths and weaknesses of the player, favorite landing spots, obviously presuming a little bit about. Where we know they might roughly be going in the draft, and then also looking at comparisons to them in the NFL. Sometimes, if we can, looking at kind of a potential floor and potential ceiling, obviously with the knowledge that comparisons are very inaccurate science. But I think it's good to have a little think about them. So we're going to start off with someone that we've spoken about already, Caleb Williams out of USC. I don't want to talk too much about kind of the context around Caleb Williams because everyone knows a lot about him at this point of where we are in the cycle. Fantastic quarterback playing out of structure, really quick release, really twitchy release, has a really good ability to feel pressure. Not quite the size that you would want, but then the NFL is moving to being slightly smaller. But he's a really interesting player. He's someone that we've liked kind of since the Heisman season a couple of years ago, and someone that has been the presumed first overall pick in this draft for a fair few. A fair couple of years, but I'll come to you, Jack, in terms of the weaknesses of Caleb Williams when scouting. What did you think about the potential downsides of him?
Yeah, that all is caveated by we think he's going to be the number 1 overall player in the NFL. So these weaknesses are, I guess, question marks. But that point that you made, that he plays really well out of structure, the question mark remains whether he can do it in structure, whether he can stick in the pocket and go through his reads and progress, because USC's offense, especially last year, was absolute chaos. There were linemen there who apparently they're on scholarships, but you wouldn't know it from how they were playing. Caleb Williams had the ball snapped to him and he had pressure in his face straight away. So he had to play out of structure. So I'd love to see him play in structure. It's not necessarily that he can't do it, but I just haven't seen enough of it to say for sure that he can. And I think if he does go to the Bears at number 1, he's going to have a much improved offensive line from what he's been used to the last 2 years. The only other thing really is his tendency to play a bit of hero ball. So there are moments on tape where Caleb Williams has a check down or a comfortable 3-yard gain and he doesn't take it. He keeps twisting, turning, shaking off defenders and throwing the ball deep downfield, which is like him trusting his incredible arm strength and his ability to throw on the run, which is incredible. But there's, the NFL defenses are better and faster and stronger than definitely the Pac-12 defenses that he played against in college.
Yeah, it's always an interesting one. It's something for quarterbacks that I see as kind of the same as winning a lot on contested catches at wide receiver or kind of lots of yards after the catch at wide receiver, that I'm less interested in your ability to just be better than all of the car salesmen that you're playing against in college, because you're going to be the most athletic person on the field there. But when you get to the NFL, everyone's going to be just as good of an athlete as you. Now, obviously, the question with Caleb Williams is it might be that he comes in and is still better than everyone when he gets to the NFL. So we'll come to you, Paul. In terms of favorite landing spots, now we know where Caleb Williams is going. So if you want, you can just say the word Bears and we can move on. But I'd be really
Bears.
interested. Okay, cool. Hannon. I'd be really interested to know your thoughts on the situation at the Bears. Obviously, trading for Keenan Allen, they got DJ Moore last year in the Bryce Young trade, signing DeAndre Swift, which I did think was a weird signing, but anyway. Do you think it's a good landing spot for Caleb Williams? Do you think they've kind of done what they should have done to set him up to succeed?
It's tough. I think the Bears are doing more. As we mentioned earlier, they're doing more for Caleb Williams than what they've done for Justin Fields. And, you know, that people have always gone, oh, yeah, Justin Fields, he just needs weapons. He just needs weapons and stuff like this. And they've never really, you know, yeah, they went out and got DJ Moore. And I think DJ Moore is a great weapon. And I think he's going to shine with Caleb Williams throwing him the ball. I think it's a great landing spot for DJ Moore and Caleb, like getting Caleb Williams there, you know. I'd like to see Caleb Williams at a different team. You know what I mean? I just think the Bears,
they're cursed.
Sort of, yeah. And I don't want to see Caleb Williams' career just end up being crap because the Bears are crap and they run badly and everything like this, you know. But yeah, I think it could work out and he could be the turnaround that the Bears actually need. I'm not looking too much into the Keenan Allen thing. I think he's on his way out. I think he's now decreasing as a wide receiver and he's not got long left in him. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see that Caleb Williams and DJ Moore connection and DeAndre Swift there with him. I'm a bit of a Swiftie myself, so I kind of like the look of that. But yeah, it's gonna be quite good to see how it all works out for them there, you know. And as long as I've got Kyler Murray at the Cardinals, I'm happy, mate. You know, get to keep my little guy.
I really like the Keenan Allen signing. I thought he was fantastic last year, and even if it's only for 1 year, I think having someone that can get open quickly underneath is absolutely fantastic for a rookie wide receiver, and a reliable tight end as well. So if I'm Justin Fields, I'm absolutely furious at this, that you're on the way out and they've immediately gone and done the thing they should have done for you the whole time. I know they didn't have the draft capital because of the trade for Fields, which is always the worry, that you trade up to get a rookie quarterback and then you ruin your franchise by doing it and you can't surround them with talent. But if I'm Justin Fields, I'm furious. Hannah, we'll come to you in terms of comparisons for Caleb Williams. I can see that you've put together both a floor comparison and a ceiling comparison.
So these are me kind of spitballing based on my thoughts, and they're not necessarily apples to apples comparisons. Now, the ceiling, I think everyone has heard this comparison already, right? Patrick Mahomes, because he can work out of structure. But, you know, realistically, if he can show that he can work out of and in structure, I ultimately do think his ceiling is potentially Patrick Mahomes type or level, you know, if he puts it all together, because that is ultimately also how Patrick Mahomes works. He's really great in structure, but when things break down or he has to extend the play, he does. He very, very rarely takes sacks, you know, and ultimately I think it has to be the ceiling outcome. The problem is people compare him to Patrick Mahomes now before he's ever even played a snap in the NFL, you know, and it's highly unlikely that he will reach that ceiling, but it's possible. So I think people just need to kind of slow their horses, don't they? If he shows it in the NFL, of course, you know, you can potentially make that comparison, but he's never even played a snap yet. So we don't know if he's ever going to reach those heights, and very few do, because Patrick Mahomes is up there on his own at this point. So it's unlikely he'll make it. So my floor comparison, now this is certainly not apples to apples at all, because I think his base kind of skill and talent is way higher than this player. But ultimately this guy had quite high expectations because he was picked very high in the draft and he bombed out. And ultimately in the floor scenario, you know, he can't play out with instruction. He also bombs out. So my floor scenario is Zach Wilson. You know, I think he probably feels pressure better than Zach Wilson, but Zach Wilson ultimately will bail when he, is not happy, and try and play out of structure. Now he doesn't seem to be able to do that, and Williams will probably likely do it much better than him. But I was trying to think of kind of a reasonably athletic QB that bombed out, and he was the most latest example I could think of. As I say, I think his processing is probably way worse than Caleb Williams. I don't think, again, they're not apples to apples, but the thing that has happened to him, which is ultimately that he was a starter and then he bombed out, could happen to Caleb Williams if he can't put everything together and prove that he can play within structure, because it's really important to be able to play within structure in the NFL.
I really like it. Like I have a lot more confidence in Caleb Williams. I never really understood the Zach Wilson thing. I was much more in on fields as my QB too. But I think the thing with Wilson was that it was always these flashy plays that he still can make in the NFL, but it doesn't matter if you can't like receive the ball receive the snap, quick look, first read, not there, second read, bang. Like, and if you can't actually make progressions and play within structure, then it kind of doesn't matter if you can make these flashy throws way down the field. So I do kind of like it, and I agree that like the reality for him is that he most likely won't be Zach Wilson, but in terms of the play style and the potential pitfalls, I can see it. So we'll come to you, Jack, for just a question on Caleb Williams. So there was a lot of weird stuff around Caleb during the offseason that people, I mean, there always is. And I think prospect fatigue is a real thing. And so lots of people were suddenly going, maybe it's Drake May over the top. And maybe it's Jaden Daniels. And even some, maybe it's JJ McCarthy. So first of all, to check, just to check, is he your QB1? And then do you think that he's a generational prospect?
Quick answer, yes, he is my QB1 in this class. I think he has shown that he has, like Hannah said, that base set of skills and intelligence and experience at the position above and beyond what the other prospects have shown. Now, I thought that was a really interesting question about whether he's a generational talent or not, because with the shape and style of NFL quarterbacks is changing, and in college it's kind of been a bit of an experiment for the last 5 to 10 years where different size and shape quarterbacks and different styles of play can succeed. But the prototypical generational prospect for the NFL is someone like Trevor Lawrence or Andrew Luck, someone who's got the size and definitely has no questions about working within structure. So I think Caleb Williams is not your stereotypical generational prospect, but I think the NFL is changing along the lines of college quarterbacks a little bit. So he could be the start of this new wave of generational prospects, but he plays a very different style to what I certainly associate that phrasing with. I think of Trevor Lawrence as a prospect. I think of Andrew Luck as a prospect, which Caleb Williams isn't that kind of prospect.
Yeah, and I think it's very easy that we think of these generational prospects as kind of 6'4", 230, strong arm, like that type of quarterback, which obviously the NFL is really moving away from. I think, I mean, the term generational is thrown around a little too much at the minute. I think we're way too quick to say it. I think there's one generational prospect in this draft, and that's future Cardinals wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr.
Come on.
So, honestly, I would laugh so much if he ended up going somewhere else. It would make my evening.
Hannah, there's no need for that, was there? There's no need.
I remember an in-season show of when the Bengals were doing terribly, and Hannah talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. going to the Bengals to be paired up with Jamar Chase.
Right? But just think about that. Then we could trade T. Higgins, right? And we'd have Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, it's just the perfect scenario for everyone involved.
It not for fantasy players. Having both of them on the same team would be bad for fantasy.
It's true. Although, they do throw the ball a lot. Joey B, he's going to be back. He's going to be chucking it around the block. I think it would be great.
This is so typical Hannah. oh, the best player in the draft should go to my team because they're the best team. We should have all the best players.
Oh, of course we should. It's obvious.
We have had both of you. I mean, I know I started off with a little love letter to Aaron Donald, to be fair, but so far we've had me talking about Aaron Donald. We had Paul throwing in that he loves Kyler Murray. We've had Hannah just throwing in that the Bengals everyone should go there. Jack, as a Patriots fan, will come to you because the next couple of prospects that we're going to be talking about are prospects that could actually end up going to the Patriots. Although, because we're talking about favourite landing spots, I think it's unlikely that the Patriots actually come up. So the next guy that we're going to talk about, I have actually done this in terms of how I think they will, how I think the board will fall, slightly differently to my rankings as well. But the next guy we're going to talk about is Drake May out of UNC. Really interesting player. Do you want to talk us through some of the strengths when you scouted Drake May, Jack?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that we spoke about that generational prospect and you said 6'4", 230 pounds, because that is exactly what Drake May measures up as, 6'4", 230 pounds out of North Carolina. And he has that prototypical size as well as being a really good athlete. Like, he has that frame and uses it well as a passer and as a runner. So he's run for over 1,000 yards in his last 2 seasons with North Carolina, and he is as opposed to some of the other quarterback prospects, he's quite young. He's 21, the same as Caleb Williams. So that's like a tick in his box in terms of room for development and growth. He has an incredibly strong arm. So he can throw the ball really, really far. Not Joe Milton kind of arm strength that we saw at the combine, but that's okay because that's all that Joe Milton has. Yeah. He'll get some great TV advert deals out of that one throw, but he won't have an NFL career.
No, cool.
But someone who will. Drake May will. I think he'll go in the top 3 picks because he can push the ball downfield really well. He's added some touch on those passes and some real intelligence when he throws the ball deep. Like, he has the arm to absolutely sling it whenever he wants. Yeah. But he has added that intelligence and consistency to not do that and not be reckless with the ball. So I think seeing him develop and grow in his protection of the ball and the way that he can control a game a bit more in his final year at UNC than we saw in the first couple of years, that was a real plus for me and something that the NFL will really appreciate too, like that progression.
Yeah, I think one of the things as well with Drake May is I think people that haven't watched him have a little bit of an impression that he is kind of a pocket passer, and the athleticism is really there as well. Like, he's, I mean, we'll come on to comparisons a little bit later, but like, I think he's good for kind of 300 rushing yards a season, more kind of as a, but actually like saw a decent amount of kind of designed rushes, which is obviously really good for fantasy. In terms of then the potential downsides of Drake May, and obviously the conversation around Drake May seems to be quite strange at the minute, that he seems to be the prospect that people have decided that they don't like and they're moving on from. Paul, what were your thoughts in terms of potential weaknesses in this game?
Just to add to that, what you were just saying, people have decided they don't like it. Do you remember that the QB that they decided that they didn't like last year and was going to fall down draft boards was CJ Stroud?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Everyone decided last year, oh, he's not that great. He's going to fall down boards and everything like that. And he turned out to be, the best. So I was trying to find, I haven't really done a deep dive into my rookies as of yet, but I have been trying to find some weaknesses with Drake May. A lot of what I seem to be popping up is he has a tendency to make bad plays worse. So if things start going wrong, he seems to make it a lot worse, and he seems to turn into sacks as well.
Yeah,
he doesn't like to avoid them very well and gets hit quite a lot. So from what I'm seeing, that there is weaknesses, and I think when you step up into that NFL level, and you've got some of these amazing pass rushers and people like Aaron Donald. I know he's retired.
Oh, stop
When
it.
when you've got people that are a lot quicker than you've seen in college, I think he needs a good O line in front of him. If he's got a good O line that can protect him, he could be an unreal talent.
Yeah, and that then brings us on to and we'll come to you, Hannah, in terms of potential landing spots for Drake May.
So this is going to be an interesting one because obviously we were having a little discussion before the show started, and I think ultimately our favourite landing spot, pretty much everyone has said the same thing for all of them. You know, ultimately, realistically, for these guys that are going in the top three, it's probably going to be, I mean, Caleb, I think, is a shoo-in at number one at this point. I think it's highly unlikely it's going to be anyone other than Caleb. So at this point in time, as we stand, realistically, his options are the Commanders and then the Patriots. Now, ultimately, we do know that the Vikings are hovering around. They've made some trades already. Draft trades. They've got 2 first-round picks now, the 11th and the 23rd, isn't it? Or is it the 26th? I can't remember. Anyway, one in the 20s, one at number 11. I think we all know what they're going to try and do with that, which is package them and try and move up. So there is a chance that they end up somewhere in that top 3 and potentially have the option for Drake May. For me personally, I would like him to go to the Vikings, and I think we all agree that the Vikings is a great landing spot for anybody. And I think probably the reason for that is Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah.
Because we know how good he is as a head coach and offensive mind. And we know how good he is with quarterbacks. So I think ultimately, of the options and of the QB needy teams that realistically are going to go and take a QB in the first round relatively high, they're the one that you want to go to. The thing that worries me about the Commanders, which is a possibility for him to go, is that they didn't get their first choice head coach. So I think ultimately they'll be looking to move on sooner rather than later. I think they were like, oh, we'll just, we'll take what we can for now, but ultimately we've got our eyes elsewhere. So I worry that the coaching staff will change quite quickly, and Cliff Kingsbury, eek, he's just not the best, is he? I just think Cliff's not going to utilise him properly, so it means he's not going to get a good start. And then, here we are, a Justin Fields situation. Everyone's been fired. He's getting new coaches. And, I think this is where situations can really destroy a potential, good and franchise quarterback. So it worries me as a place. Like, ultimately, actually, they've got pretty good weapons there on offense. Yeah. But are they going to utilise him properly and develop him properly so that he can utilise his weapons? And it worries me that they're not going to. And obviously, we all know that the Patriots situation on offense just really isn't the best at the moment. So it would worry me, them pushing him into a situation. Now, if they let him sit for a year, that might be a different story, if they're able to kind of put more pieces around. But I would be worried if they pushed him out in week 1, that, again, he would just be ruined. So the Vikings are my choice.
I like it. And I think this is definitely kind of the question that we're seeing at the moment. And it's obviously the regular thing. Like, obviously the Bears have the 101, but that's not their pick. Like, that's the best thing that can happen for you, is that you are better than a 101 team when you eventually get it, whether it's because of injury or whether it's because of trading for someone else's pick. Like, seeing these quarterbacks go into terrible situations is kind of worrying. I love Drake May. He spent a lot of time this offseason as my QB1, and there's very much, he's now back down to QB2, but like there's very much a tier between so it's Caleb Williams and Drake May at the top, and then Jaden Daniels afterwards. In terms of comps for me, so ceiling for me is Justin Herbert in terms of the athleticism and the arm, but also the ability to work within structure, but kind of create. I see a lot of Justin Herbert within his game. Also kind of that, like, the inexperience coming in and some of the flaws within his game that we saw with Justin Herbert when he was coming out. Then the flaw comparison, and Paul, you noted about kind of that, the ability to make bad plays worse, the ability to kind of go into sacks when he doesn't really have to. And the other thing that I noticed with him is that he there's sometimes the tendency for his accuracy to kind of fall apart when he's playing out of structure. and his footwork can struggle. So the floor comparison to me is Daniel Jones, which, like, let's be honest. I mean, I know Drake May is going to be a top 3 pick, but Daniel Jones has been like a multiple year starter in the NFL. Like for a first round talent, that's kind of fine. I know, like he gets paid $40 million a year. Like that's incredible. But I know we want more out of him than Daniel Jones. But that, to me, in terms of some of the negatives combined with the athleticism, is someone that I saw. I'm going to move us on to Jaden Daniels. Obviously coming out of LSU. Jaden Daniels is someone that I struggle with and that I definitely like more for fantasy than I like for the real NFL. Paul, what are your thoughts on kind of the strengths of Jaden Daniels' game?
So I'm going to be honest, and I haven't looked into Jaden Daniels. So
Yeah.
if anyone else wants to take his strengths, by all means, you crack on.
I'll go for it.
You crack on.
His athleticism is the incredible thing about Jaden Daniels. So obviously the Heisman winner this year, his timing is good, his accuracy is good. He has a decently sized arm. And he played really well within the RPO game at LSU. Obviously, they have 2 first-round receivers at LSU, so that did often help. Like a lot of the time that you saw the ball going to kind of Malik Neighbors on a shallow crosser, and there's one game I'm thinking of in particular where Malik Neighbors is running horizontally and still manages to turn the corner and take it for like a 60-yard touchdown. So it does help when you have those players in front of you. But the athleticism is the big thing for Jaden Daniels, that he's the best runner in the draft. Does have a tendency to kind of use it a little bit too much and lean on it a little bit too much. We'll come to it later in terms of his rushing ability and his rushing style, but he's a solid enough quarterback with a very high upside in terms of the rushing game, in terms of the way that the NFL can tend to be leaning at the minute. Hannah, what about the weaknesses of Jaden Daniels' game?
So I think a lot of it is around the passing rather than the rushing, isn't it? So his arm strength isn't quite as good as the other 2 we've just talked about. So it seems relatively average. He can be quite quick to bail out of the pocket. So often his scrambles will turn into runs rather than him trying to extend the play, by passing. He doesn't always give things chance to develop. When he throws deep, his balls can hang in the air a little bit. And I think ultimately, at this level, that can either mean that the defender's caught up with your pass catcher or an interception. I think he can spray the ball around a bit as well, particularly when he's not set his feet. His biggest issue, I think, and the biggest risk with him, especially from kind of a fantasy point of view, because I think realistically he's going to start this year, or at least play some of this year, depending on where he ends up. But he has this quite slender frame, and he has kind of no thought for protecting himself. And ultimately, I think we potentially have a risk of injuries, like a Anthony Richardson-esque situation last season. And I think ultimately for fantasy, in the short term, that is his biggest risk, that he goes out with injury and we haven't got him for the season.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of hang around that point for the second there, that my biggest concern with Jaden Daniels is that I think he's going to get killed in the NFL. There's so many comps that you'll see of him rushing, and he doesn't know that he's skinny. He doesn't seem to know that he's not absolutely gigantic, because he loves lowering the shoulder on opposing linemen or linebackers and gets absolutely killed. And we've spoken already about the fact that the NFL is more athletic and people are bigger and stronger and faster. And I just worry for him that he's going to come into the NFL and get his ribs broken on his first drive. And I don't think, I think the problem is, I mean, obviously, like, you can coach a certain amount out of him, but I think the worry for me is that he doesn't seem to know that he is going to get killed, even though it's happened multiple times at the college level. What are your thoughts? I'm going to come to you, Jack, on that point in terms of his athleticism versus the potential risk. What's your thought on kind of Jaden Daniels coming into the league?
Yeah, it's strange that he doesn't realize how slender he is, because he came into Arizona State at 170 pounds. So
Jesus.
he's put on 40 pounds of playing weight. Like, that's not just putting on weight for the combine. He's played at 210, and he doesn't realize how far he still has to go if he wants to play with that style. If he wants to truck linebackers over, he needs to put on a heck of a bit more weight, and he'll lose some of that speed. And the problem is he glides across the field, like horizontally and vertically. He runs with such a beautiful style. He is quick. He is really clever with his footwork. He's just not clever with protecting himself. And that's a huge risk for the NFL. There's a huge risk in college, but he's kind of got away with it because we've seen he is quite talented. He can get those angles, and like you say, he likes to put the shoulder down, and maybe he's been a bit clever or maybe lucky with the angles that he's taken when he's put his shoulder down. But equally, he's also had a ton of injuries, so he's not got that fortunate.
Yeah. I'm gonna stay with you, Jack, because my favorite landing spot is the Vikings. It's the same conversation that we had around that Hannah made the points on around Drake May. In terms of potential comparisons for him, who do you tend to see when you look at Jaden Daniels?
Yeah, it's easy to look at running quarterbacks. So I've put a floor of Anthony Richardson, and that's not because they're the same player necessarily, but obviously the comparisons are there with the athleticism and the college production in the rushing game, but also that lack of awareness that they are going to get smacked with their running style. And Hannah mentioned Anthony Richardson. We got 4 games out of him, and it was great for fantasy, and it was fun to watch as well, as probably if you're not as a Colts fan, because you had your heart in your mouth every time he took off. But that's what Jaden Daniels is coming into the league playing like. He's playing like someone who's going to bail out the pocket quite a lot. He's going to try and run through players, and I just worry so much for him and so much for the team that drafts him. I think there's a lot of work to be done in this first this first training camp and off season for whichever team drafts him, to really coach him up on how to protect himself, how to slide properly, because he doesn't even have a good technique in sliding. When he does slide, it's clunky and awkward, and on an artificial turf could really damage his joints.
Yeah, I think that Jaden Daniels could really do with sitting for a while, and I don't think he will. But I think Jaden Daniels could definitely do with a bit of time to develop behind an established starter. Let's move on to the next quarterback. So this is the presumed QB4 in the class. He's actually not mine, but JJ McCarthy out of Michigan. So he's really a polarizing prospect, and he seems to have been rising a lot in the off season, which I always worry about players that rise not while games are being played, that we're kind of discovering things about them when they're not playing, when we've seen all of the tape. But what were your thoughts, Hannah, watching JJ McCarthy?
I mean, obviously at Michigan, he actually was not asked to do a great deal. You know, he was more of a kind of game manager, wasn't he? They did a lot more rushing. He didn't actually have to throw all that lot. But when he did throw on time and in rhythm. And actually, you know, based on his college career, he was actually really excellent on third downs and in high leverage situations. So even though he hadn't played all that much, when he was asked to do things in those situations, he did really well. He is comfortable under center and can work with the RPO game. So that might be something that they want to utilize. You know, if they choose him, might want to do kind of a lot of work with that, because he is comfortable with doing those. And obviously some quarterbacks don't always necessarily have that within their game in college. And although he's not an elite runner, he does actually have functional speed. So he can make plays when he's with his legs if needed. You know, ultimately, I think the challenge with him. Well, I'm on strengths, aren't I? I'll let you go, Lewis. I'm going to say
Yeah.
no more, otherwise I'll steal. I'll steal
This
your.
was this was an unintentional joy for me to cycle round through who was doing what, and I ended up with JJ McCarthy's weaknesses. He, to me, I mean, he's so raw. The ceiling is absolutely there, but I mean, he's young. He's, you know, got decent accuracy, decent arm strength, but to me, we just haven't like the sample size is so low with him, and he needs a lot of development, and quarterbacks just don't tend to get it. So the weaknesses generally that I saw, obviously he has a slightly slimmer frame, and then his arm strength is probably below average for an NFL starter, and you can see kind of throwing balls outside the numbers, that he tended to struggle when you got to the boundary. The main thing for me that I spotted is, and it's something you see a lot with college quarterbacks, he struggles a lot with touch, and he struggles layering throws to different levels of the field. So a lot of it was just absolutely rocketed into receivers, and that Michigan receiving core was pretty good. So it was okay, but you're going to struggle in the NFL if you can't manipulate DVs and manipulate different areas of the field. And also a lot of the time that you know, you want to throw a guy open, and I didn't really see him do that. It was more see a guy get open and then throw it to him. So I think that anticipation, like the accuracy is pretty good, the timing and the rhythm is pretty good, but I'm just not as high. I'm definitely not high enough on JJ McCarthy to see him as like a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. Let's come to you, Jack, in terms of favorite landing spots. Is it the Vikings?
Yeah. If he's going to be a first round quarterback, then it is the Vikings. But ideally, and this maybe shades a bit of where I value JJ McCarthy, if he falls to the early second round, mid second round, then there are teams there that he could go to where there's going to be a little bit less pressure for him to start. So somewhere like Las Vegas or Denver, teams that do need a quarterback, but
even the Rams,
even the Rams, where the window to win is either not his, because for the Rams that will be under Matt Stafford, or the team is just not ready to compete in their division. So if he could have that time to sit and develop and learn, I think he would really benefit from it. My biggest concern with JJ McCarthy is that he plays at one speed. Like you say, he rockets the ball in, but he throws with his whole body. So it's not arm strength, it's body strength. And I don't think that translates that well to the NFL at all. So my perfect landing spot is anywhere that isn't the Patriots from a fan point of view. And yeah, if he gets time to develop and gets that kind of Will Levis route of sitting for at least half a season and the pressure being off him, where he can learn and he can be surrounded by some talent. Yeah, if he could fit in not that Shanahan is looking for a new quarterback, but if he could fit into a Shanahan system, that would be perfect for him.
Well,
so if they want to kick the rookie QB clock down the road, because I don't like Brock Purdy either, but
well, the Shanahan system and the connections through to the Vikings through Sean McVay is there, so that could work. I'm going to speed us up for the last two prospects on our list. So Bo Nix and Michael Penix. The things I like Bo Nix, and I think I'm above consensus on him. That I really like the accuracy, I like the arm talent, and I like the ability to work through progressions as well. I think he's a really strong processor. So he fits in as my QB4. But Jack, there were some weaknesses that you'd seen within his game as well.
Yeah, I think Bo Nix, the offense at Oregon fitted Bo Nix perfectly in the way that it was schemed up and the talent around him. So one major concern is his ADAR, his average depth of target was really, really short. And that is because he dumped the ball off very quickly. And I think that stems from a lack of composure under pressure. I don't think he reads pressure from linemen particularly well and can panic. So he'll either drop deeper and deeper and then throw off his back foot, which isn't ideal for an NFL quarterback, or he'll dump the ball off quickly to his running back, which is a good thing. You do want to see that, but just not as often as Bo Nix did.
Yeah. Hannah, Paul, is there anything? I think we'll skip on landing spots and comps for these two, but is there anything about Bo Nix? Hannah, should I come to you if there's anything you wanted to say about him?
Not particularly, to be honest.
Cool.
These last two are guys that I have not dove into particularly. I'd just like to make a point, because Paul is trying to say that he was really clever by picking his favourite landing spot, and I'd just like to make a note that actually I chose the same landing spot for a different player like 3 hours ago, and Paul now quickly wrote his on the show sheet while we were doing the show, and I think subliminally he's stolen it from me. So I just wanted to make a point of that.
The problem in the running order is that you both put the 49ers for Bo Nix and Michael Penix, and then Jack mentioned the 49ers as his potential landing spot for JJ McCarthy, and now it sounds like you've stolen it from Jack, when in reality I do know that Hannah put that in the show sheet first. But let's
I don't put things on the show sheet. I don't put things on the show sheet.
Well, there it says 49ers co-host 1.
Yeah. And
that was like maybe 15 minutes ago, Paul.
Maybe you made a mistake. Maybe you made a mistake or something and put it in the wrong bit. But...
let's just quickly go through Michael Penix. And if you take the strengths, Jack, and I'll have a little conversation about the weaknesses as well.
Yeah, Michael Penix is a pocket passer. He is someone who throws with accuracy, and he hits receivers in stride, leading them open or into space. He's really good at keeping his receivers out of harm's way, if that makes sense. Something that is maybe lost a little bit in the NFL at the moment, but he can lead them out of danger, and that's great for fantasy for yards after the catch. So that's a big tick for Michael Penix. He's got a beautiful deep ball, and he does have some real touch on his deep passes. He can absolutely rainbow a pass into the breadbasket of his receivers, which you saw particularly well in the college playoff semi-final against Texas. And I think he's got really good pocket movement. He's a good processor, and he's got the potential to be a really solid, reliable NFL quarterback if he gets the right surrounding cast and if he gets the opportunity to be the starter.
The funny thing is, he's one of the quarterbacks that's going to come in that his starting receivers are probably going to be worse in the NFL than they were in college. Because the trio of, when he was healthy with Jalen McMillan, who is my guy and I love, but the trio of Jalen McMillan, Rome Odunze, and Jalen Polk is absolutely fantastic. That's definitely, that's probably going to be a top 10 pick and 2 day 2 picks, which a lot of NFL teams would love. And you kind of touched upon the weaknesses of Michael Penix, and I think it's kind of the thing that if this was the early 2000s, Michael Penix would probably be the 101. He's a strong-armed quarterback who's great at processing in the pocket, but pretty immobile, pretty long release, and struggles when he's on the move. But the problem is, it's not the early 2000s, and the game has kind of moved on. And the other thing which is worth touching on briefly is obviously the injury history. So four season-ending injuries, which obviously is a concern across his 5 years in college. So we'll start to wrap up. I just wanted to have a quick note on sleepers outside of the top 6. So I have one, which is Spencer Rattler, who is someone that I liked quite a lot. I mean, he was kind of the presumed 101 a few years ago. He has fantastic arm level, fantastic arm talent, decent mobility. He struggled staying in the pocket. And could often step up into the rush, and also like to see someone come open first again. But like the talent is still there in terms of the reason why we thought he was going to be the 101 a couple of seasons ago. I remember going into, must have been the 2022 NFL draft, which is the Kenny Pickett draft, when it was Spencer Rattler and Sam Howell 101 and 102, and then look what ended up happening. I can see that you wanted to talk about Michael Pratt, Jack, who's someone that I haven't watched a huge amount of, so it'd be good to know your thoughts on him.
Yeah, Michael Pratt is your old school NFL front office who love someone who's got grit and determination and will look for the deep pass at any opportunity. So he's 6'3", 217 pounds. He's got some clean fundamentals. He played for Tulane, so he played in a lower tier of competition than some of the guys we've been talking about. But he really hangs tough in a collapsing pocket, and he's an aggressive passer, so he will go downfield. If the pre-snap read says that he's going to get one-on-one coverage anywhere on the field, he's telling that guy to go deep, and he's chucking it. Now, this isn't someone who is likely to be an NFL starter. He's probably going to be a high-end backup in the NFL, but we've seen what high-end backups can do when they have to play, and Michael Pratt's kind of someone you might want to pick up off the waiver wire. I don't think he's going to be anything in your drafts, whether that be redraft or dynasty.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. So we'll close off just with a question of how many quarterbacks do you think get taken in the first round? We'll start with you again, Jack.
I think it's going to be 4, but as long as it's not my team taking the 4th guy, I'm okay. So I think Williams, May, and Daniels are a lock, and it sounds like JJ McCarthy is going to be in that first round as well. I wouldn't take him there, but I'm happy to be proved wrong.
Yeah. What about you, Paul?
I think them 4, but I think McCarthy goes before Daniels, and I think the Patriots take him at 3. No, I don't want to do that to you, Jack. I'm only joking. I think the Vikings trade up a lot. I think they go and get McCarthy. I think they want him. That's set in stone, if I'm honest.
I can see it. What about you, Hannah?
Yeah, I think it's going to be the 4. I think teams now are a bit more wary about these kind of borderline players, and we've seen over the last few drafts where they will wait until round kind of 2 and 3 for some of these that they're not totally enamored with. So I could see just the 4 going ultimately.
Yeah, I think it's 5. I think that we get those 4 within the top. I'm going to be honest. I think top 5 picks, or at least top 10, which again I don't see with McCarthy. But I think someone ends up coming back up towards the back of the first 4. I would go Knicks, but Knicks or Penix, whether it's someone from that tier who misses out. So Denver, although they'll have to come up a long way because they don't have a second. Vegas, New Orleans, even I can see the Rams doing it as well, and coming up to get that 5th year option on another player. But I just think we'll see 5. So that brings us to the end of the show. Jack, where can we find you? Thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you if they want to hear more?
Oh, thanks for having me on. The best place to catch me and the rest of the Devi crew is on the Wildcard Devi show. We have an X handle of at Wildcard Devi. Sorry, you can follow me at Jack CDCTT, but you'll get ramblings across many different sports there. So if you're looking for fantasy football in Devi, follow the Wildcard Devi.
Wonderful. And the work you guys are doing there is fantastic. I'm not a Devi guy myself, but I've been really enjoying the first few episodes of the show. So thank you so much to everyone for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe and follow us on X at Wildcard Rewind. Head on over to our YouTube channel, search for us at Fancy Wildcard, and make sure you give us a subscribe. And we will see you next week.